I know this is a bit late to post a video about President Trump's visit to the UK, but I've had to teach myself video editing, which took quite a while owing to my techie illiteracy. Anyway, one of the things I love about Trump is his ability to bring about Trump derangement syndrome amongst the witless leftist media, after which they are quite prepared to brazenly lie and twist facts and reality in order to fit their hateful, seriously hateful anti-Trump agenda. Just listen to the intro from Channel 4's ghastly little reporter Matt Fry.
They call these armoured limos the beasts, and today their wheels got to crunch the gravel at Chequers, not in menace, but in apparent remorse. This trip to rural Buckinghamshire, as opposed to iconic number 10, was always going to be a little awkward. But the President was on an apology tour, greeted by an ashen-faced hostess, smiling, but never with her eyes.
That rather set the tone, didn't it? I think we can safely assume this bitchy adolescent attitude toward Trump would continue, and so it duly did. Next up is John without an H Snow, he of Fuck the Tories fame when he got down with the kids at Glastonbury. And note how he's arranged his presentation in front of grossly insulting placards, and then listen carefully as he allows a Labour MP to lie without question.
Now I'm joined now by the Labour MP Rushanara Ali and by Michael Avenatti. He's the lawyer representing Stormy Daniels, adult film actress who claims she had a consensual affair with President Donald Trump. Well now, Rushanara, I mean, this is our ally. We've all learned to love America throughout our lives. Have we got to change our minds?
Not at all. We love America, we love Americans, they are our allies, but we don't approve or like what Donald Trump stands for. He's presided over expressing hatred towards women, towards Muslims, towards minorities, and he's locking up innocent children in cages.
First of all, darling, you don't speak for Britain when you say we. You speak as a Muslim stroke communist. A real fact never mentioned by Channel 4, of course, was that the majority of those questioned thought Trump should be welcome to Britain, so you're a liar. Secondly, Trump has never expressed hatred towards women, minorities and Muslims, so you're a liar. Thirdly, the cages you speak of come from the Obama era, so you're a liar. And fourthly, they're not innocent children as such. Some are the children of illegal immigrants held in adult detention centres, and many are trafficked children, which is presumably something you care little about.
Because he's a narcissist, he doesn't like that. He's hypersensitive and starts to go on the offensive. And frankly, our Prime Minister has seen this all blow up in her face. Because what has he done? He's humiliated her. He stood next to her and said Boris Johnson would make a better Prime Minister.
No, darling, he didn't say that at all. When asked if he thought Boris would make a good Prime Minister by the Sun newspaper, he replied he thought he would. He said nothing about him being a better Prime Minister than Theresa May, so again you're a liar, and again you are allowed to lie by the slithery Snow. And next up we have another ageing Channel 4 hackette of typical FEMAFIA leanings reporting from the anti-Trump march, which seemed to be filled with various examples of low information morons at best and seriously unstable lunatics at worst.
This is a passionate crowd, and it hasn't escaped them that the two leaders who President Trump has insulted on his trip to Europe are Angela Merkel and Theresa May, two older, powerful women. And the other leader who he singled out was the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, who happens to be a Muslim.
Look at the smile on her face as she lies. Trump didn't insult these two women because they are women. He politely pointed out to Theresa May that America would be wary of a favourable trade agreement with Britain because Britain was clearly not going to leave the EU under May's rather useless negotiations. He told Angela Merkel to actually pay the agreed 2% of Germany's GDP into NATO, rather than relying on America to make up the difference, along with warning her that a Germany dependent on Russian energy was probably not a good idea. So no insults, just facts and reality, which means Channel 4 is lying again. And what of Sadiq Khan? Did Trump insult him because he was a Muslim? Or did Trump simply point out that Mayor Khan should do a little more about the horrendous violent crime in London and a little less about bringing his office into disrepute by allowing a diaper-wearing Trump balloon to be flown in London? The only insults were to Trump. And in the case of Calamity Khan, he is a prime example of why I have suggested Muslim politicians who swear their oath of allegiance on the Quran should not be allowed to hold political office in Britain. Khan cares nothing about London and a great deal about global Islam. The only reason he hates Trump with a fanatical passion is because Trump, quite rightly, seeks to halt Muslims travelling to America from known Islamic terrorist hotspots. And next up we have the opinion of a drag queen, those well-known experts on global politics, and this one is just as mad as you might expect.
A drag queen who'd come from Manchester found herself thinking about the 1930s and the rise of fascism.
I think it's an important thing to remember the lessons of history and where this kind of behaviour leads and the parallels, you know, that kind of use of right-wing support in order to gain political power and where that leads.
Nice one, Channel 4, but here's a word of advice. If you seriously think Trump is the reincarnation of Adolf Hitler, you're mentally unwell. But if this is really the position you wish to take, would it not be better to interview an eminent historian about it rather than a semi-crazed creature with mental stability problems? Don't you realise how childish and ridiculous you're making yourselves? How you're dragging any vestige of professionalism and integrity into the journalistic gutter? And next, we move on to the speech from the quasi-communist leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, in order to get a grown-up opinion from an important and powerful, fully grown man.
Once they'd arrived in Trafalgar Square, the crowd was addressed by the Labour leader.
Here in London and around this country, our message to our visitor is we are united in our hope for a world of justice, not division. We're united in our hope to end racism, misogyny.
Okay, forget about grown up. What a silly little student union activist he is. Can you believe the words coming out of his mouth? He sounds just like one of those vapid contestants in a Miss World competition spouting platitudes about world peace and cuddly polar bears. And the point Channel 4 wanted to get across, of course, was that Trump wants global war and race war and spends his evenings skinning cute little multi-culti bunny rabbits. And all of this is pretty extraordinary, isn't it? And more importantly, it's shameful. Next, we go back to little Matt Fry, who goes on to make a fundamental error in pitting his low intellect and left-wing political bias against a man with a far superior intellect who deals in facts and reality. And I don't want to give the game away, but here's the thing, little Matty. Sebastian Gorka wasn't laughing about something you said, he was laughing at you, which is hardly surprising. Watch.
Now from Palm Beach in Florida by Sebastian Gorka, former deputy assistant to President Trump in the White House, now a commentator on Fox News. Welcome to the programme, Sebastian Gorka. You're a British citizen, although you worked in the White House, and you're now in Florida. When you see those pictures of thousands of demonstrators on the streets of London today, does that make you proud of British democracy?
I'm an American citizen now, but I was born in the UK. And yes, I'm glad that the UKs are not a totalitarian country where you're not allowed to disagree politically. So yes, whether it's demonstrations with regards to Brexit, which is a reassertion of British sovereignty, or the arrival of a head of state, that's what democracy is all about.
And as an advisor, as a former advisor to the president, would you have advised him to give that interview to The Sun and say those things?
He is the master communicator. He knows exactly what he's doing, whether it's a 2 a.m. tweet or whether it's an interview with one of the most popular newspapers in the UK. So he doesn't need anyone's advice when it comes to strategic communications. The fact that he's got 53 million followers alone on Twitter tells you everything you need to know.
Yet he spent quite a lot of the day on an apology tour, squirming in front of Theresa May, saying sorry for the things he'd said to the Sun. So which is the version, the real version of the truth? The Sun version or the version we heard at the press conference at Chequers?
Well, look, I grew up in the UK and I know there's not a lot of Tories at Channel 4 or ITN. The idea of you saying anything nice about Donald Trump is absolutely,
come. I'm just asking you which is the right version.
This is a man who has never squirmed in his life. If you think that he was squirming today, you live in an Alice in Wonderland fairy tale.
What's wrong with a bit of humility? He did actually apologize today. I mean, he did utter those words.
There's nothing wrong with humility. You used the word squirming. You used the word squirming. I worked for him. I worked for him before he was president. I worked for him in the Oval Office. The words squirm and Donald Trump have never, ever been applied in the same sentence. So I know it's wishful thinking, perhaps, on your behalf, but it's not a reflection of reality.
Let me talk to you about something else. And this is the indictment of 12 named Russian agents hacking into the DNC. Indictments, today in the United States, that is pretty serious, isn't it? That's a very serious allegation leveled at the Trump campaign because those agents helped Donald Trump through the hacking get elected.
At the Trump campaign, you haven't even read the indictment. It has absolutely nothing to do with the Trump campaign.
So guess what? We've done the homework. It says very clearly that these Russian agents have been indicted.
These spies spied.
12 named Russian agents have been indicted for helping the Trump campaign, for hacking into the DNC.
No, you just made that up. Literally, this is the definition of fake news. Nothing in the indictment says that they were hacking into the DNC to help Donald Trump. You are literally committing fake news live on British television.
You influenced the election against Hillary Clinton. You helped Donald Trump. There are only two candidates in that election.
Listen, the indictment states that members of the Russian intelligence services spied. So, newsflash, there's gambling going on in this casino, and I'm shocked. If you think this is new, then you haven't opened a history book. The Russians have been doing this since about 1918.
And does that not worry you? Does it not alarm you as an American citizen that Russian agents are hacking into an American election, trying to influence the world's greatest democracy?
They are the most... Look, Kim Philby, Anthony Burgess, McLean were at the highest level of British government working directly for the Kremlin. So if you think that you're going to get on a high horse and talk about how damaging it is to the US, you should look in the mirror first. It's what the Russians do. It's just their mode of behavior. And the fact that they're being indicted is wonderful news. But they're Russian nationals in Russia, so nothing's going to become of it.
So if that is what Russians do and have always done, are you confident that President Trump, when he meets President Putin in Helsinki on Monday, will not be taken for a ride?
This is just so amusing. Taken for a ride. The man who had never held public office before, ever, not at the state level, not at the county level, destroyed a woman in a political campaign who was feted by the left-wing media. The New York Times said she has a 92% chance of victory. That man's going to be played. A man who is a billionaire New York real estate magnate in the hardest market in the world. That guy's going to be played. Not on your Nelly, my friend.
You may think this is funny, but when you talk to Eastern Europeans, people living in the Baltic republics or in Poland or indeed in Hungary, which is where your father came from originally, is that right?
Yes.
They are worried. They are deeply worried about what Vladimir Putin might be up to. Well, you may think it's funny. They're on the sharp end. They don't think it's funny. Don't you think that
I don't need you to lecture me on what Hungarians think.
I am not lecturing you. I'm just asking why you're laughing at something that people who live in those countries, on the sharp end, including, in Hungary, where your father came from, This is a place that was run over, rolled over by Russian tanks in '56. Don't they deserve to be taken seriously when they're afraid of Vladimir Putin? And are you confident
yes, and
that
they
Trump
are
will
a little bit more. They're being taken a damn sight more seriously than President Obama took them. A man who did absolutely nothing when Russia rolled into Crimea and annexed that territory. In the last year and a half, Donald Trump has taken every single policy decision in a way that is bad for Putin, whether it's unleashing oil exploration in the Anwar district, whether it is increasing sanctions on Russia, whether it's increasing NATO spending, increasing our defense budget. And last of all, don't lecture me when we are actually giving arms to the Ukraine. Do you know what Obama gave to the Ukraine? And this isn't a joke. This is truth. He gave them blankets and socks.
Right.
Socks. That's really going to stop the Russian hordes, isn't it?
So in your book, is Donald Trump friend or foe?
He is a friend to anybody in the Judeo-Christian civilization who stands by Western values. The most important speech he has ever given is the Warsaw speech, where he reasserted American leadership, and he said, if you are part of Western culture, if you believe in Judeo-Christian values like we do, we will stand shoulder to shoulder with you, whether you are Israel, whether you are Belgium, whether you are the UK. That's Donald Trump, and everything he has done has supported that statement, from arming the Ukrainians, from standing up to Russians, to kicking out. You know how many agents Germany kicked out after the Skripal assassination? 3. Yeah. We kicked out 60. So who's taking Russia seriously?
Just one more. I mean, in the press conference today, there was a fascinating moment when Donald Trump returned to the subject that is very close to his heart, immigration. And he gave a very dark vision of the effects of immigration on Europe, which was then rebuffed by Theresa May, who said, well, actually, immigration hasn't been bad for this country. Where do you stand on that?
Well, it depends.
May versus Trump on this issue of immigration.
Right. Well, it depends which immigration you're talking about. When I grew up as a kid in West London and the school bus driver was Jamaican, my best mate was from Ireland, my other mate was from Pakistan. It was great because those people, those families integrated as Brits. But today, when you have female genital mutilation in Bradford, when you have honor killings, when you have grooming gangs, that kind of immigration is not good for anybody.
Donald Trump in his press conference today seemed to be talking about immigration in general. And, had a very, you keep laughing, but it's a very important point. Immigration in general has a very dark vision for Europe. And actually, not only the British Prime Minister, but many people in this country thought that his particular assertion was not just anti-immigrant, but also, frankly, tinged with a bit of racism.
Now, this is why it's so important to come on channels like yours that are so utterly biased. I've worked for the man, and I know the man. There isn't a racist molecule in his body. This is a man who has pardoned black individuals already because they were convicted for racist reasons. His child, his daughter, is Jewish. His grandchildren are Orthodox Jews. And when the media and the loony left call him a racist and a bigot and anti-Semite, they are liars and they are reprehensible. This man is talking about the kinds of immigration that has caused Brexit, the kind that has caused all kinds of terrorism across Europe. That kind of immigration isn't good for anybody.
Sebastian Gorka, thanks very much indeed.
I don't think I need add anything to this exchange, as Sebastian Gorka came close to destroying the grinning little monkey in much the same way Professor Jordan Peterson humiliated Channel 4's token feminist and half-wit Ms. Cathy Newman. Finally, we leave the sewer of Channel 4 and close with the BBC's Emily Maitlis interviewing the orally challenged ex-Labour leader Ed Miliband, who seems to have some difficulty with the British language by dint of a Gromit-esque set of gnashers you could eat an apple through a letterbox with. And notice how he just throws out the usual leftist slurs without being able to back them up. Not that the biased BBC would ask him to substantiate it, of course.
Well, most importantly, his values, his racism, his misogyny, his respect for authoritarian regimes and his apparent contempt for democratic regimes.
I don't suppose Ed got much in the way of Lego, though, when he was at school, so a powerful rich man like Trump, who accepts some of the many women who throw themselves at him, probably infuriates celibate Ed, he of the well-developed right hand, hence his envious accusations of misogyny. Racism. Trump has ever-growing support from African Americans who realise he wishes to genuinely help them, unlike the evil Democrats who want to keep them down in order to utilise them in their racial identity political war. So no racist Trump. And respect for authoritarian regimes. Trump has sanctions in place against Putin's Russia over the annexation of Ukraine. Ditto theocratic Iran, which wants to build a nuclear bomb. He's pressurised the theocratic Qataris and Saudis into stopping their funding of Islamic terrorism in Europe and the West. He has forced totalitarian North Korea into descaling its nuclear ambitions, and he's attempting to force NATO members into actually committing the money they promised to commit in order to face down a potentially threatening Russia. So Ed Miliband is a liar, just as are all the left-wing little children masquerading as grown-up politicians and journalists in this video. Finally, Britain is looking to America as a trade partner after leaving the European Union. Do any of these witless lefties not realise the leader of the country they wish to do business with is a man who really shouldn't be insulted and dishonestly smeared? If Trump were the vainglorious, thin-skinned egotist they tell us he is, then he would be quite within his rights to simply tell Britain to feck off. He won't do that, precisely because he rises above the obscene left and works instead to better his own people and the people of other countries to boot. So yet again, the left brings shame upon Britain and does so without a single degree of foresight about the future of this country. They exist only to destroy Trump, and if that means economic hardship for Britain, so be it. After all, none of them will be out of their highly paid propagandist jobs. They really are the most ghastly little people, and if you happen to watch this video, President Trump, I apologise on behalf of my sad, betrayed country. The level of support you have here is enormous, so please don't think that 0.1% of left-wing journalists represent Britain, because they most emphatically don't. They represent only themselves and the Communist International, of course.